you have to look at this very carefully, read between the lines, and also where is Biden sending the troops? He's sending them only to NATO countries, Poland, etc., not to Ukraine. Right? They Europe is really in serious, serious trouble, and this whole Great Reset is has begun and was able to sell it because of the problem in Europe. And if you look at the head of Europe is on Klaus Schwab's board. She recently resigned only for appearance sake. The head of the ECB, Lagarde, she's on his board. The head of the IMF is on his board. He has all these young leaders basically that he has installed in different governments around. I mean, you've got, the head of New Zealand, Trudeau in Canada, and just look at what they have all done. They, wherever anybody's connected with Schwab, they've had the most draconian lockdowns. You can't build back better unless you destroy something first. And that is really his idea. And you have to understand that he's an academic, and talking only to academics, everybody pats each other on the back. And really what it's all about is that he thinks that it's really this Marxist idea, and they talk about, equality, equal as far as material wealth is absurd. We're all equal in rights. You cannot have equality materially and liberty simultaneously. It's impossible. They're on two separate sides of the table. And so, I mean, liberty is if you want to be whatever you want to be. You want to be a TV star, a football player, soccer player, whatever, you have the right to do that. Whereas under communism, you did not. It's like, okay, we're short somebody this week, the floor over here, you're next. That's basically it. The only innovation that ever came from a communist country was basically for nuclear arms. That was it. That was the famous Nixon, kitchen debate, from 1959. That innovation economically, which created the economy and raised the standard of living, all came from the private sector. Not from government. Government doesn't do anything but, basically retards the economic growth. So they contribute nothing to GDP as far as a growth perspective. They have to take money from you and they pay themselves. And honestly, we found in searching all their formulas, etc. And one of the girls in the office came to me one day and she says, there's a huge mistake in GDP. It's so blatant, it's got to be a mistake someplace. I can't find it. Would you take a look? And here it was like they count all total personal income and then total government spending, but they don't separate the people that work for government. So they're counted twice. So I called the head of the Bureau of Economic Analysis and I said, look, this is such a absurd mistake. Would you take a look at it? Let me know where, because I can't find where you're backing it out. He says, all right, fine, Marty, I'll get back to you. And a week goes by, I hadn't heard from him. And I called him back. I said, hey, I said, did you find out where this mistake is at? And he said, no comment. So that's basically it. I mean, when you look at GDP in most of these countries, they count the government twice. So if the government hires somebody, they're counted as part of government spending, but then also in personal income. So it makes it look like GDP is doing better if they hire somebody. And effectively, it's kind of like if you hire a maid for your house. And then you go, well, I want somebody else to do the cooking. I mean, if you have the income, you pay them, okay? But they don't contribute income to the household, they consume it. And that's the government. They contribute nothing to the welfare of the economy. It's just regulation, and they consume whatever that is. And unfortunately, maybe it's a human trait, but you take somebody in a small business and they always want to, make it better and better. When you put them in government, they want to do the same thing. And so that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So it consumes, so much to the point that it basically makes the economy implode.
And is that what we're looking at? Are we looking at the economy completely imploding, Martin?
Well, we're in a very serious situation here, and that the central banks have used Keynesian economics from the Great Depression, and it sounded nice. Okay, fine. They're going to raise interest rates, and that will cause us to buy less. All right, or the lower interest rates to stimulate us to go out and buy more, and that was basically the theory. The problem was that government was never even considered. Well, today the government is the biggest borrower. So if they raise interest rates, it doesn't mean that politicians say, oh, we should spend less. They don't even pay attention. So that you can't control inflation anymore. The central banks have completely lost it. So, you're going to fight inflation, you're going to raise interest rates, and it causes the government to spend even more. This is the dilemma that we're in. And that's what this great reset's about. So when Klaus Schwab is saying you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, that's more or less a trying to make it pretend that they're doing it for you rather than for them. If they default, then all the pension funds go, and you'll see millions of people down there, not with trucks, but with pitchforks, going after them. So this is the real crisis. The whole COVID thing has been mainly a cover for this real agenda. And it's, they've increased their spending dramatically with how they're going to pay for it. They don't care, because they expect at the end of the day, they're just going to default on everything. So that's really what this is about. But we're now starting to see, the I don't know. I guess the spiel that they use to sell this is falling apart. First it was, you get one vaccine, then it's two, then it's three, then you're going to need boosters every 3 months. Obviously, it's not like a polio vaccine that you get it one time and that's it. It's an ongoing thing constantly to keep you in check. And if you miss one booster, you're no longer vaccinated, you lose all your rights. It's a great little excuse, but it's controlling society. That's really primarily what they're doing.
I just want to pause you there, Martin. If you've missed my interview with Karen Kingston, where in the title it actually says never-ending vaccines and tracking and AI, that interview exposes in the World Health Organization, every approved COVID-19 vaccine by the World Health Organization, we've got the patents. It must include a tracking capability, and the plan really is for never-ending vaccines. And again, I'll talk about Australia. We've got a factory now here in Queensland that's going to be manufacturing 300 million doses a year. What for? We just launched that last year. COVID's done. COVID's done. The narrative has crumbled, Martin. The whole world is waking up, and more people are starting to realize, as you said, it's booster after booster. People got it to travel. They thought that would be the ticket to their freedom. But here we have people still in chains, not in the way that they're locked down, but they're in chains in different ways. Their employment still depends on them getting booster after booster, socializing, attending a wedding. And this is still the case in so many countries, although we are seeing in Europe more and more countries backing off from that. And we've seen quite a few announcements this week. What I thought was interesting was that Israel has also announced that they're backing off from all restrictions. This is the very same Israel that said that they were going to track citizens through their phones to see whether they were a close contact and send them a testing kit to their house, and employ and put the domestic terrorism agency onto tracking citizens through their phones. Why is it that they're pulling back? Is it because of this panic mode that your computer's predicting? Do they know that that's coming?
Well, I think they all kind of like tune in to us to see what the computer's saying this time. But as I've said, I mean, the longest you can possibly create something like this is 2 to 3 years maximum. And that's what's happening here. And if you look throughout Europe, I've been, posting for, 2 years, resistance is not futile. And you see these people constantly. The press isn't covering them all. But I mean, every week there are protests throughout Europe. And the politicians are beginning to see that this is, it's not going to go away. So, what are you going to do? I mean, you have to completely eliminate democracy in order to stay in power. And still, they're liable to come. All right, they might not have guns, but they'll come after you with pitchforks or something. So I think it's just reached the point where some countries are simply just realizing this, and they're not in the real core ones. But you have like, Denmark and Finland, Switzerland now has joined, South Africa, even Spain has downgraded COVID to nothing more than a flu. We all know people that have had COVID. My whole family, had COVID. They didn't die. And, this is just the way it is. And so it's just been propaganda, really. And I don't think that, it's settling very well globally. I mean, the politicians have used it for political purposes, but then you have another group of politicians that are just doing it as a reaction because others are doing it. And I mean, it's not that they're part of a conspiracy scheme or something like that. They're just, oh, well, they did it, so I guess I should, and that sort of thing. I mean, here in Florida, where I'm at, it's getting a little, I think, kind of crazy, but there's over 1,000 people a day migrating from like New York and California and other states to Florida every day. I mean, traffic is definitely doubled. I'm not in favor of that. But I mean, I just went to a dinner to go meet with DeSantis, and I was actually impressed that he could deliver a speech that was that he wasn't reading from a teleprompter or from notes. I mean, but as he said, when he first ran for office, in Florida there were 300,000 more Democrats than registered than Republicans, and he won. And now today it's nearly 100,000 more Republicans registered than Democrats. So all the migration is changing things quite dramatically. But it's, we're getting this sort of thing. And I mean, Florida is, we don't walk around with masks. I mean, everything is fine. It's like normal. And then you hop on a plane, you go up to New York, and it's like, oh my God, I forgot about this. And I mean, I don't even want to go to New York anymore, anywhere. It's like, and the interesting thing is that private jets have boomed because people don't want to get on these various different things. I mean, I had to take one to go to this affair with DeSantis because there wasn't a direct flight. So I said, all right, let me try one of these things. And there's no TSA, nothing. They come, oh, how you doing? They take your bags, they put them in the thing, and off you go. That's it. No masks, no nothing. And you can see why, it's a huge booming business anymore. But
well, I think that this entire orchestrated crisis has created a great opportunity for people who are for freedom to operate outside of, you know, the matrix of corporations, big corporations, and really support one another. And you know, one of those things you're saying, you know, private jets, or, you know, supporting those businesses that aren't part of the larger chains. And it is actually providing opportunity for people who want to break free from the system of control. I think it's fabulous. But I want to go back to this panic cycle that your computers are predicting, Martin, because I guess, is it possible that they are going to orchestrate a war? Is that possible, that that's going to happen, and that's what's going to create the panic?
Well, I think the panic is the collapse in confidence in government in general. But I can tell you that what they are, it's not that they're giving up on their ideas, all right? They just need a diversion. And what they're looking at is deliberately creating war. And like I said, if you look at the negotiations, all right, Putin's absolutely correct. I mean, you put missiles right up to the border, Poland and all these different countries. All right. Well, when Russia did that in Cuba, we had a fit, you know. And he's just saying you pull back all that stuff to 1997 where it was. All right. And they go, no, you know, I mean, and how do you negotiate with somebody and just refuse everything they ever say? Are you trying to poke them to absolutely really just do something? And, you know, I think that they are, you know, going to church, lighting candles and praying that Putin comes in. So then they can get out of the COVID stuff and say, oh, see, now you need us here to protect you, etc. And so to keep their positions, it's like a bait and switch, because it makes no sense to do what they're doing to Russia. And you have to understand is that if you look at all the polls, you know, Trudeau, Biden, et cetera, their approval ratings are in the 30% level. Putin in Russia, it's at 65. Now, from his perspective, if he does nothing, he looks weak. You're letting the West, you know, browbeat. If he goes in, they would cheer. Now, the big mistake with all these sanctions and everything is that you impose sanctions on a country and they don't blame their local leaders. They know who's doing it. So you create more of an international discord. Like in Iran, do they really blame the Ayatollah, or do they blame the great Satan that they call in the United States? I mean, when you go, you know, in their face and saying, I'm going to do this to you, they know it's more or less a nationalistic type thing, and you end up supporting more of that local regime, whatever it is. In this case, it happens to be Putin. But he holds, I think, at this stage of the game, the highest approval rating of any world leader, and, you know, in his own country. So it's just, I am concerned about it because we're in this war cycle as well. And does it lead to World War III? Perhaps, if we don't back off of this posture, but I would say not until you're looking at 2025 to 2027. That seems to be the real bad period. But
why is that?
I don't know. I think basically because we're looking at our economic system that we've been using since World War II. It's just collapsing. You can't continue to borrow year after year and have no intentions of paying anything back. And when I have sat down and talked to people in various different governments, their excuse is, well, we're the government, we can do it. And that's it.
Lovely.
Yeah, it's just not, there's no rational thought behind this. And I've even showed them, I said, look, 70% of the national debt at times is just the cumulative interest. So it didn't even go to roads and schools and helping orphans or anything that you want to pretend that you're helping with. It just goes out the back door to the bankers. So then you make it even more of a crisis because a lot of these governments have mandated pension funds must be invested in government bonds. And then you lower the interest rate on government bonds, and then you make the pension funds insolvent. In California, so the pensions, the politicians look good. They told the pension funds, oh, you must invest in green. Well, they lost money in all the green investments. So when you have politicians interfering in even the investment decisions like this, it's a real disaster. So the system itself, I really think that we're probably headed towards a revolution in the sense of a new form of government. I mean, not that, there's going to be, tanks running down the street and stuff like that, but we reach these periods in time where the current political system just simply is unsustainable. And that's what we're heading into. And so I think after 2031, particularly for the younger people listening, you have to ask, okay, what would be a better system? And I really feel that we've tried, aristocrats, we've tried kings, we've tried republics, dictatorships. I mean, why don't we give direct democracy a shot, where people have to vote actually on every bill, but that would require you can't, stuff every bill with all sorts of different things that have nothing to do with what the subject matter really is. And I mean, people are shocked, but I point out that Social Security in 1934, when Roosevelt put it in, bill was 16 pages. Obamacare stood 7 feet tall. There's so many things in there that you have no idea what they are because nobody has the time to even read them. And the same thing with the Patriot Act. I mean, they're just huge, and they're intentionally made so big so that nobody sees actually what they're doing. So I would say direct democracy, if you're going to create a Clean Water Act, only clean water is in it. You want something else, that's got to be a separate act. And then maybe we can get back to having a government that's really for the people and by the people. But republics tend to be the worst kind because they start out magnanimous, but they are always subject to corruption. I mean, that's why Caesar crossed the Rubicon. I mean, it was just, why was the calendar, did Caesar change the calendar? Because basically the high priest was in charge of it. And to avoid election, they would bribe the priest to add a few extra months for leap year because they didn't want to go to election that time. And that's why Caesar actually designed the calendar. And that's why the months that we have, it was all him. That was a political reform.
So Martin, I agree with you that we need to look at a completely different way of government, politics, and society in general, because a lot of people are saying, oh, we just want to go back to how things were. No, actually, we don't. Society was in a very bad spot. Lack of morality, the education of children in schools and the things that they've been exposed to from a very young age needs to stop. So many people, even here in my state, here in New South Wales, over 10,000 current pending applications for children to be homeschooled. Unprecedented numbers. We used to look at a 2 to 3, maybe 4 week wait for those applications to be approved. They've blown out to over 3 months now because people just simply do not trust the education system. But I want to zone in on what you said about 2025. So this panic cycle that your computer's predicting is not a collapse this year. Are we right?
No, it's a political upheaval, which I think we're seeing. We're seeing these a number of countries starting to back off of COVID. Then the ones that probably try to hold on to it the longest. This is people are rising up and beginning to see that this is just nonsense. And I think what COVID has done has accelerated the view of the collapsing confidence in government. And do you trust them? I mean, why? I don't know. What politician ever keeps his word about anything? And I think the worst possible thing was when they got involved in health. Because I've worked with governments all around the world for 40 years. And the one thing I can tell you is that a politician never wants to ever admit a mistake, period. So once they've got involved in this COVID, are they ever going to say, oh, gee, sorry about that. We didn't know about the side effects or anything like that? Never going to happen. So they need some sort of diversion. And that's what I believe the war is about. They need, they're praying for Putin to go in so they can change the headlines of the newspapers. Then they won't focus on COVID. They move to something else.
Is it possible, because you spoke about people losing faith in world leaders, is it possible that, I just posted a theory last night, that they've purposely made them look stupid in the public eye and made them look incompetent in order for the world to lose faith in these leaders, so that people will scream for a new government and they bring in this solution which ties into the New World Order, the Great Reset, all of this?
I don't know if I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but you look at, for example, Soros has been funding the movement to defund the police. This is to create, basically to make people fear, even walking down the street. And if you look at even like Black unemployment in America, it was at a historic low under Trump. And nobody said anything. And then all of a sudden we get into this thing about defunding the police. They picked on a few things to really expose racism again. And it's been deliberate. And that is kind of like the same thing that even the Nazis did. You always divide groups, one group against the other. And then as long as everybody's divided, then whoever's in power is able to gain power and he doesn't have to worry about everybody uniting against them. So I think that if you look at what has taken place in like Canada and New Zealand, that these are graduates of Schwab's young leaders. Their polls have dropped dramatically, and I don't think that was intentional. I think Schwab was just, in his never land. And as I've argued, all right, Marxism kind of made sense in Russia in the 19th century. They had serfdom up until 1861, where serfdom ended in Europe in the 14th century. So their serfdom ended with the U.S., civil war against slavery. So these people own nothing. They had nothing. All right. So saying, well, let's go get all the land and assets of the aristocrats, at least made sense. Today, people own their own houses, they got their own cars, they have savings account for their children. Does it make sense to say, oh, give all that up and you'll own nothing and be happy? I think this is the problem of Schwab and his unrealistic dreams. And so I think that they have deliberately tried to crush the economy to make people accept his ideas. But as far as the world leaders are concerned, basically, if you look around the world, he's got control of just about all of them. I mean, like I said, the head of the EU is not even elected, and she comes from his board. Biden is a never land. Kerry, sits there and basically kisses the ring of Schwab. I mean, they're all sitting there, basically saying, yeah, you're right. And I think it's mainly because he is pitching this idea that democracy ends and then they get permanent power, more of a dictatorship. And I think that's what's really attracting them to his ideas. But that's not going to survive. It's just not going to, he's not going to be able to pull it off.
And so,
he is collapsing now.
Well, that's certainly good to hear. So what happens in 2025, according to the predictions?
Well, I mean, that's where the economic tensions are basically going to probably lead to international wars. I mean, even you take the Ukraine issue. Eastern Ukraine are really all Russians. Crimea are all Russians, no Ukrainians, and some Tatars, which are the leftover Mongols from from invading. They don't speak Ukrainian. Even Yanukovych, when he took power in Ukraine, he could not speak Ukrainian without an accent. So they never saw him as Ukrainian, and he was basically trying to put in an oligarchy and things of this nature with his sons. And because I was advising, I said, look, if you want to basically create a revolution, what you have to do is you've got to turn the police in your favor. And you do that by saying all his people are Russians, not Ukrainian. And that's basically how they got it going. But here you have Ukraine saying that they will defend their borders. Why? This is like going back to the old imperialistic days. Well, that's my territory, but there are not Ukrainian people there. Let the people decide where they want to be and whatever, but we're still caught up in this territorial idea. I mean, so you have China with Taiwan. Well, that used to be ours. So I think the old imperial ideas are probably going to come to a head in 25 to 27 period, and I think that's really what has to be resolved, and that's ancient history, and let's get it over with and forget it, and move on. And so I think after 2032 we're going to look at a new form of government, and because if we just look at what we have, there's no way we're going back to normal. And even the normal didn't work in the sense that they were just borrowing all the time and never, paying anything back. The central banks are blocked in a corner because if they raise rates, then the government spends more. It doesn't stop the spending. So they can't even control inflation anymore. So the central banks are trapped. The whole system just doesn't work anymore. We do need a great reset, but not the way Schwab is preaching.
So I do think are we saying that they're going to drag this war and war tensions all the way up to 2025 to potentially 2027? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand those in power. They don't want to give it back. And so they will do whatever they can to keep it. And that's simply the way it is. So I find it curious that most of these people, Schwab, Fauci, I mean, most of all these people, they're in their 80s. This fourth industrial revolution, making body parts. What is this? Are they afraid of dying and they think they're going to be able to manufacture hearts to keep living or something? Why is Fauci still there working for the government? He's over 80 years old. He earns more now than the president of the United States. Why are you there? It's only power. how much more money are you going to make? I mean, forget it. It's you can't spend it. So what are you going to do with it? Just count it on your bed at night or something? It just doesn't make any sense. So I mean, I think we're dealing with people that are approaching their end of life, and they seem to be, maybe kicking and screaming all the way, and want to. I mean, even Soros. I mean, come on, this enough. Why are you trying to hurt the world? I mean, that was so good to you. Just leave it alone and fade off into the sunset, please. But I think that's basically what we're looking at. In order to get to 2032, yes, we got to drag these people out because they're going to be kicking and screaming all the way.
And then 2032 is there a prediction that things will change in that time
Yeah, that's when government basically fails. That's when we get to redesign it, and maybe constitutional conventions, things of that nature. And then there'll be debates, just like there were, for forming, United States or France or whatever. So we have to, look at it that way and help the younger generation say, what kind of world do you want to live in? And I think that's really important. And I mean, I've got grandkids. I'm more concerned about their future than mine. I'm ready to leave, but this is just the way. If you look throughout history, it's always this way. It's no government has ever survived. If they did, we'd all still be, speaking Babylonian. These things have risen and fallen throughout, the centuries, all the time. Because as soon as you get somebody in power, they get addicted to that power and they want to abuse it. And that's what happens. And then it goes to the point that it gets to an extreme, that they're overthrown, and that's it, and it starts all over again.
And in the meantime, I mean, if this is the timeline that we're looking at, in the meantime, what's going to happen to the economy? Are people going to lose everything? Is there going to be, I mean, are people at risk of losing everything in the meantime while we battle with this fake war narrative?
It depends upon how you deal with it. All right. You have the central banks right now saying, "Oh, well, the inflation is just transitory. It's going to be back down." That's nonsense. What they have done with this COVID and the lockdowns, etc., is effectively they have created. They've seriously hurt the economy, and you've created this supply chain crisis, and this is not coming back anytime soon. Fertilizers in shortage. I mean, all sorts of different things. I mean, even here in Florida, I go to the store and this week they won't have that, or next week they will have something else. So when I see something, I buy enough of it right now. So that's part of the inflation. It's like, okay, fine. I'm going to buy, this one's available this week, so I'll buy, 2 or 3 months worth. And next week, maybe it'd be something else. That's what inflation's about. It's not the way the central banks look at this, that it's demand, speculative type thing. We're dealing with shortages. So raising interest rates is not going to stop the shortage. It only makes it worse. So people are going to buy things and hoard it because it might not be available next week. And that's what creates this type of inflation. But that also results in stagflation. So in other words, the inflation rate is higher than the economic growth. And that causes the economic stress, going forward. So, and the central banks, they think that they're in charge of something, so they got to do something. They don't want to appear to be doing nothing, but there's nothing that they can do. It's just the system as it currently stands is uncontrollable. The central banks have no ability to stop inflation. This is not a speculative boom. This is basically, the inflation is being caused by shortages on a global scale.
Right. And I've had a lot of people from Australia ask what's going to happen to the Australian economy. People are afraid here. Our government is out of control, Martin, out of control, worse than most Western countries, I would say. I referenced Australia as I made reference to Australia as the guinea pigs of the Western world for the Great Reset. Really, what does your system have predictions about what's going to happen to Australia specifically?
I haven't looked at those yet, but what I did look at is that I think your tension against your political system right there currently is only going to rise going into the October-November period. And this is showing up in Canada as well. There might not be an opportunity to get rid of Trudeau, but you're looking at provincial, elections and municipalities. And I think you're going to be looking at a lot of these things really just rising up and changing politics at the base level initially. And maybe that starts getting the attention of those at the top. But just look for those that are linked one way or another with Schwab, because he is the one who is absolutely pushing this agenda. And our computer shows he's failing. And we're heading into a very difficult period between here and mid-March. And I think you're going to see it's economically, it's, the civil unrest is rising, and you're getting some of the countries starting to back off. So we're seeing a break in their unity, so to speak. And then it's going to be like, even Australia starts saying, well, South Africa got rid of it. Israel got rid of it. Why are we still here? So then it becomes more of a difficult position for your politicians to maintain it.
Right.
And when all the governments are doing the same thing, it's easy. When you start getting differences going on here, it's important. So I think that, we're going to see more and more of this, and because the civil unrest is real and it's rising, and I don't see the government as being sustainable in a lot of places beyond October, November of this year.
It's interesting that you say October, November, because we have elections coming just in a few months. We're talking about May. So I wonder whether the prediction of October, November, why is there continued political pressure past the elections? I really sincerely hope that Australia doesn't vote one of the major parties in, but we've had one particular MP that I interviewed recently, George Christensen, say that it's unlikely that Australia will move out of the two-party system. And I wonder whether that's why those political tensions will continue.
Most likely, but I was going to do a report on that because your elections are coming up. France's is in April, and so you're going to see whether or not Macron even survives. He's at least up in April. So it's definitely. I mean, this is the first chunk going into May. Then probably, I would say the November elections are very important in the United States because as it stands right now, the Republicans would basically win the House. And if that's the case, then Biden's agenda is stopped. And he's already getting in trouble a lot right now and can't get his Build Back Better thing, and he even puts the label on it, which came from Schwab. I mean, it's just they count on people just being stupid, and unfortunately, really, unfortunately, that is their view from the top down, that we're just like a herd of cattle and we're just too stupid to really, understand what they know. And they know better, and that's just the way it should be. But I will update that on Australia for you and put that up before